Another way to phrase it is be flexible. Sometimes we think discipline we have to be inflexible, right? Like I gotta be the solid, immovable object in this relationship. Well, it's okay to be flexible and experiment and try new techniques and try things that worked with one child, but they don't work. Okay, we're gonna pivot. You know that old Friends episode, pivot, pivot. Well, here we are halfway through summer, and this episode's theme feels summery, doesn't it?
Does it?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean the music?
Yeah.
Not the content.
Not the there was no lyrics. Not the lyrics.
Yeah.
You know, for some reason, this song sounds like this movie soundtrack of a movie I watch on Netflix.
What's the movie?
I'm really hesitant to recommend movies because everybody has different flavors and different tolerances for content or whatever. But this one I think was rated PG-13. I'm sure it had something in there not super appropriate. But I stumbled upon this movie called A Beautiful Life.
Okay.
A Beautiful Life. And you have to be willing to read subtitles because it's like they jump in and out of English and like Swiss German or what do they speak in Denmark? Danish?
Danish. Yes.
That's a language?
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
I studied abroad in Denmark.
You did?
So I knew it for like 3 months and then I forgot it all.
I think it takes place in Denmark. Anyway, it's a really cool movie about this little musician who gets discovered and his life blows up big and all the consequences of that. Oh. But the soundtrack is super cool and that music felt like that movie.
That's like his music that he plays in his band
lyrics,
or something?
Yeah, he has lyrics, but anyway.
Oh, fun.
I will say this, as parents, the last song in the movie is called A Beautiful Life. And if you want, I'm convinced like this song would be all over the place if the movie wasn't so tiny. It is the most like cry song or mom cry. I've listened to it 50 times since I saw the movie a week ago. And I cry every time.
During the credits or just as part of the movie?
No, it's like the last scene of the movie.
I see.
And it ties it all together. And it's a whole thing about finding out his wife's pregnant and they're raising their girl. And you're like, oh, I'm just crying. So dads especially, but moms too, if you want like one of those hurt so good songs,
heart-tugging.
Go onto Spotify and listen to the lyrics of A Beautiful Life from the movie A Beautiful Life. Wow. Now streaming on Netflix. I'm curious. This episode sponsored by Netflix.
I know. What a good plug for that song.
I do not endorse all the lifestyles of all the characters. I do not endorse all of the language of the movie. I simply endorse the last song as a parent.
But if you want a good cry,
as
a parent, that tugs at your heart
and makes you realize how quick it goes.
Oh, is it like that?
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
Oh man.
No,
now I don't want to watch it.
It's terrible.
The
movie's not about that at all.
Or listen to it.
The movie is not that at all until the very, 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 very end.
They bring in that.
Oh boy. What are we talking about this
What are
episode?
we talking about today? Are we talking about Netflix, movies?
No. This is episode 3 of our discipleship series. So we mentioned this in the last episode. If you're new to the podcast or if you're just kind of jumping around, this series on discipline, Decoded, really is a listen to episode 1, then listen to episode 2, and then come and join us here for episode 3, because we've talked about sort of the big picture and some definitions and some ground rules and common ground about what even is discipline. One of the reasons I keep saying discipleship is because in episode 1 we talked about discipline is really about discipleship.
Yes.
Yeah. In episode 2, we talk about the dangers of discipline, like, hey, here's some things to pay attention to.
Right.
Here's some things that when you discipline this way could cause some problems, unintended consequences. Yeah. And this week we're going to just get super practical and say, hey, here's some doable tips.
Yes.
We'll call this week, producer Chris will call it doable discipline. How's that?
Doable discipline.
Nice. Doable discipline. Discipline you can do. Our church has a podcast called Doable Discipleship.
I know. It sounds so similar.
Yeah. So I feel like we need to give them a shout out since we're kind of stealing their name. A little nod. Doable Discipleship brought to you by Saddleback Church.
Yes. And Doable Discipline brought to you by On Purpose Parent Podcast. On Purpose
Parent Podcast. our podcast does not live up to the grandeur of that music. No, we cannot live up
our tips are just going to create this aura of majesty.
No, our tips are like beep-a-doop. Our tips are like ching. They're
like a little bell chime.
Just a little. They're not. Hit that one more time, Chris. Can you? Do you even know where it is?
Tip number 1.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't work.
Does not. It does. I mean, I like it. It just.
Oh man,
I think we're more like this. That's it, huh?
No. That's too aggressive.
Do you have like a bell chime?
Yeah, give us like a little happy bell, a little happy.
Here is a tip.
Do you know Grace? Look how Grace is so pleasant and wonderful. And I'm just super shallow. So give us something
that fits both of it.
Wait, what's it?
It's like a bird.
Oh, there it is.
Crickets.
There it is. Crickets. You might have gone. You went a little too far, Chris. Anyway.
All right. Okay. So yeah.
Grace, we're just going to share.
That's right.
4 or 5 very pragmatic things to think about. Tips, tools when it comes to discipline.
Yes. So we're going to jump right in. We're hoping that this will be a real practical episode. In the last couple episodes, we talked about mindset and how we can think about things and just things that we might emotionally and mentally want to consider. And this one is just what can I actually do to implement some effective discipline strategy? So my doable discipline. Dun-dun-dun-dun.
Okay, that's close. That's as close.
I still think that probably fits us better than the grand one.
He's gonna. That's as close as we get.
This gets us on track.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The show is about to begin.
This we're getting way off the rails.
We promise, listeners, we're about to start.
You know
to
what's
get
interesting?
into it
As we continue to ramble. When I listen to podcasts, I don't always love too much dilly-dally.
Ramble? You're like, please, get to the point.
And yet when we do our podcast, I really like rambling.
I know. It's so much fun.
Here's what I think it is. I think to do a good, effective, to-the-point podcast, you either have to do it alone or you have to not really care about the people you're doing it with. But we all like each other.
I know.
Right? And it's kind of good to see each other.
So
we're just hanging out, hoping other people want to hang out with us, which they don't by any stretch. So for the 4th time.
Okay, are we going to do it?
Actually, our time is up.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks for joining us.
All right. Okay, now we're really going.
Okay. All right. Okay. Deep breath, everyone. All right. My first tip is implement some strategies of sharing control with your kids in a moment of when you're needing to implement some discipline. And what I mean by this specifically is implement or utilize choices and compromises. For example, a lot of times when a struggle is happening between a parent and a child, it's a power struggle. A parent is trying to say, you listen to me, do this behavior. And a kid is like, no, I will not listen to you. And it looks differently, obviously, at different ages and stages, but that's essentially underlying a struggle of, I want you to act this way as a parent, and a child saying, I don't want to do what you want me to do. Yeah. And you have this clash. So one tip to avoid this or to help mitigate this is to offer your child choices, 2 choices. And it could be like, instead of just being like, why don't you pick up your toys? Like, you never pick up your toys. I've asked you to pick up your toys so many times. Like, don't do that. And then the kid is, not listening to you. Right. But you could say, all right, you have 2 choices. Which would you like? You could either pick up your toy now, and then you can go back. Or
never, ever go outside again.
No.
Oh, okay.
No. This is why we ramble, because it's too much fun. It's, you could either pick up your toy now and then finish the show that you're watching, or finish the show that you're watching, but then later you have to pick up your toy. I mean, that's I couldn't think of a better one, but like you're giving...
The toys are going to get picked up.
Yes.
But you're giving them some freedom.
Yes. And actually, you would be surprised. I've tried this with my kids, like just bringing in an element of choice, and giving it to the child. And as a parent, you're crafting the choice. So you're really still managing the whole situation.
Yep.
But by giving them an element of power in this
Yes.
power struggle, it is very effective at diffusing a clash, because now the child, and if you do it in like a warm, engaging tone as well too, like, I mean, not everything has to always be like angry mode. They are being bought into the process. They are now engaged, and then after they choose, you can say, okay, great. So let's go over this. You're going to finish this show. It's going to be 30 more minutes, and then you're going to clean up your toys, right? And if you don't at that time, this might be the consequence. And they're like, okay, I got it. And they are, now you are both on the same page with expectation. They made their choice. You're agreeing to their choice, and you could move on that way as well.
No, I like that. It brings up a really funny story from, I don't know if it's funny, for me it is, from my childhood. Junior high was my parents were beginning to give me more choices on stuff.
Yeah.
And one of my chores was to mow the lawn.
Yeah.
And I can remember it clear as day. They had always said, you have to mow the lawn on this day. That's lawn mowing day.
Okay.
And one day my dad said, hey, Kurt, you're getting older. Here, all I care is that the lawn gets mowed once a week. So before you go to bed on Sunday night, before the next school week starts, the lawn needs to be mowed. I don't care when you do it. It just needs to be mowed once a week.
Yeah.
Before Sunday night. Awesome. And Tuesday came, I hadn't mowed the lawn, and my dad said, hey, Kurt, I just want to remind you, I don't care when you do it.
Yeah.
I know, Dad, I know.
Yeah,
okay, just Thursday night. Hey, Kurt,
Okay.
I just a reminder.
Yeah.
Just a reminder. You can mow it whenever you want, but before you go to bed Sunday night, Dad, I know. Duh, come on, Dad, get off me.
Yeah.
And every day, Sunday night, maybe Monday morning, it's like 1 a.m. My dad comes into my room and says, hey, Kurt, wake up. What? He says, time to mow the lawn. Dad, I'm asleep. Come on. Time to mow the lawn. My dad made me go out, start the lawnmower at 1 in the morning and
That's a great
mow the
story.
front lawn
That's
before
an
I could go
amazing
back.
story.
And the whole thing was, hey, we talked about this. We agreed. I gave you some input into the choice, and you still couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to let you not go by.
Right.
So.
Yeah, no, and the thing is that you're learning, right? Like, you've been given this choice.
I learned.
And as a kid getting choices, if you never get choices and you never fail at how to discipline yourself to enforce your own choices, and you always have a parent that's doing it for you, if you don't get a little bit of that wiggle room, freedom as a kid, you don't learn. So that's great.
That's good. Well, talk to me about this, Grace, because where I thought you were going, when you first started talking, I thought you were going to go to like inviting their input into the discipline.
Yeah.
Would you say that is that kind of the same? Is that totally different?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think that can help when we've talked about before as well in previous episodes or podcast episodes about building or inviting them into helping come up with what are reasonable consequences. So they're on the same page. Now, obviously, if their consequences is we get to eat ice cream, it's like, okay, that's not rational here. But if everyone's on the same page, anything that in your monitoring as a parent, monitoring the situation, any place where you can build agency in the kid, that really helps to build buy-in. And then I think for younger kids, like toddlers, it's just a really easy and quick but useful tip. Like when they're screaming and crying, it almost distracts them. But do you want this bear then or this bear?
Yeah.
Like, 'cause I know your bigger sister took the other bear, but you could have this one or this. Which one do you want? And now it like changes their focus to, I want this one.
Right.
And
that's good.
Kind of
That's
helps
good.
them process.
Well, my first little tip on doable discipline, and I hit on this a little bit in the last episode, so a couple of mine might feel a little bit redundant, but it's just a reminder that one size doesn't fit all. Discipline is going to be different in every situation. What worked for one kid doesn't work for the next child. Different crimes require different, and that's all good. And one size doesn't fit all from family to family. So you look around and you might have friends or colleagues or people at church who are in the exact same parenting stage as you are. Their kids are the same age. and you see how they're disciplining, how they discipline may work really well for you, but it might not,
Right.
right? Because they're children of the same age, but they're not the same. There's no two children who are the same personality-wise. We know
Right.
that in our families, certainly from family to family. So another way to phrase it is be flexible. Sometimes we think discipline we have to be inflexible, right? Like I got to be the solid, immovable object in this relationship. Well, it's okay to be flexible and experiment and try new techniques and try things that worked with one child, but they don't work. Okay, we're going to pivot. You know, that old Friends episode, pivot. Pivot. As parenting involves a lot of pivoting.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
So be willing to change it up and mix it up and try new things. One size doesn't fit all.
Yeah. And actually with my first point, it goes with compromise too.
Right.
It's if your kid has a good compromise to your two choices that you might have given them, it's okay to be flexible and say, you know what, that works.
Yes.
And I accept that compromise.
Yep.
Okay. Another tip I have is, and we mentioned this in the first episode about what discipline is discipling, which is training, teaching, learning. But another thing is to practically work on building up skills in your kids. Sometimes we miss that when we think about discipline and we just kind of focus on punishment, like timeout.
Yep.
But the other thing you can do is ask yourself, in this situation, what skill is my kid lacking that they're acting in this way?
Yep.
Is it like, how to handle when, like impatience, right? Like when someone is taking too long and they just don't know how to handle that emotion of impatience. And so then they like shove their sibling or something. Or is it lack of like structure, or like they can't follow through.
Right.
And so they don't listen to you. Like what, really ask yourself like a detective, what skill, not like what, not why is my kid so bad, but like what skill are they missing? And how can I creatively teach that skill? And
That's really good.
one thing could be like role playing. So if you think and you kind of think about it like, oh, my kid is just really bad sharing. And the skill is they want what they want now.
Yep.
So it's like a patience. So it's like, okay, I want to teach them patience. How do I teach them that skill? Well, in this, let's role play, Karis or Zoe. Like, and it will change obviously at different, whatever age your kid is at, how kind of simplistic or basic it is. But let's just say like a young child, you could say, let's just practice. Like you go first and I go first in like a setup situation. Like role playing can be a lot of fun because you're just setting it up. It's no pressure. It's not a real situation. And then you could affirm them like, oh, great job sharing. Like you're acting together and then they get a little bit of reinforcement of, oh, they may not do it well in the heat of the moment, but they're starting to get some tools of, oh, there is a different way I could be reacting in this situation. And we've role played this. I've practiced this with my parents, and then they are building up their skill.
Yeah. That's awesome. Another real practical tip for me is, and this is probably a little bit more for older children.
Okay.
There's probably pieces of it that work with younger kids, but consider really spelling out and stacking hands ahead of time on what the consequences are when they do something that requires discipline. Especially if you see things that are maybe repetitive. Hey, it's obvious we have an anger issue. We're having some challenges getting home on time or whatever. Let's talk about what the consequence should be. An example of that, because what I like about that is now they've stacked hands ahead of time that, hey, if this happens, this will happen. And so they know, right? It doesn't catch them off guard.
Right.
An example I would share is a buddy of mine. He's not a buddy of mine. He's older and more of a mentor. Was once doing a parenting workshop. And he was talking a little bit about this. And he told the story of when his son first started driving. He said to his son, look, here's the thing, you're driving a loaded weapon. Like, the vehicle, you can kill yourself, you can kill somebody else. And to ensure that there is a curfew with the car.
Right.
And when you use the family car, you have to be home by 10 o'clock, whatever the time was. And if you're not home by 10 o'clock, you're going to lose access to the car for a week. Does that sound fair? Oh yeah, Dad, that sounds fair. Well, like week 2, his son came home at like 11:30 or whatever, and this is back before cell phone. They don't know where he is, so they're scared. He comes rolling at like 11:30, and all his dad said was, "Huh, I'm kind of surprised that you chose to give up access to the car for a week." Well, what do you mean? Well, we agreed that if you came home late, that a reasonable consequence would be not to be able to drive for a week. I'm just kind of surprised that you chose to do that. And it really kind of that was kind of the end of the conversation. His son was upset, but his son also knew, no, you're right. We did agree to that.
That's good. That's really good.
I think it's really when we can, and the kids are old enough to remember the conversation, remember that that we stacked hands on it, and you can't do that for every single possible scenario.
Right.
But the big ones, go, hey, here's a new. Hey, we're letting you start to date now.
Yeah.
We're letting you drive the car. You're getting your first job. What those big things, right? If it goes south, let's stack hands on a reasonable consequence, and then they own the decision to get it wrong.
And
most of the time.
it takes the sting or the headache away from being like impulsive or reactive because you've already established it. It's great. It's just effective communication too.
Hey, and son, I want to be a man of my word.
Yeah.
And my word was, if you choose to come home late,
what can I do?
You forced me to keep a promise.
Yeah, I know. I want you to be able to drive, but unfortunately, you chose.
You chose. I'm heartbroken that you put me in this situation.
That's funny.
Does discipline work when it's manipulative? Probably not. Manipulative discipline probably doesn't. Okay.
That's not the title we want. It's great. Okay, so another tip I have is focusing on doing transitions well. I see a lot of parents doing this well now. I think this is something that, collectively maybe it's been talked about a little bit more in recent times. But what I mean is transitions are often a time where things can go wrong because it elicits, emotion. So what I mean is like kids are playing and then you're like, time to go. No, I don't want to go. Or, they're over at their friend's house or they're watching TV and now it's time to stop watching TV and do something more boring. Like often fights or that power struggle comes at that time. And so someone shared it with me like this, just to kind of get into the mindset of the kid. Kurt, do you have like a favorite TV show or a finale that you watched that was just like, this was the best finale ever of like a show or Chris, is there like or any kind of TV show that you just get really engrossed in?
Back in the day, I was totally into 24.
Okay, that's a good one.
24.
Sam loved
Tina
that
and
too.
I are rewatching that right now.
Oh wow, yeah, Jack, right?
Yes, Jack Bauer.
So you're watching Jack Bauer, and this is the finale, and you are like, oh my goodness, like is he going to save the president or whatever world crisis there is? And then let's say Rachel, your wife, comes and turns the TV off.
That would not go well. Yeah, I would be very sad.
What emotions in that moment would be elicited inside of you is probably like, what? What did you... I'm fully engaged in this fun activity, and why did you turn the TV off? And she's like, Kurt, it's time for you to go.
It's bedtime.
It's bedtime. It's bedtime, Kurt. I wasn't going to say that, but Kurt, time to go brush your teeth. Time to floss.
We know you get cranky after 10.
And it's 10:05.
It's 10:05.
And right, you would have that emotion. So anyway, that illustration is just a point of, helping us relate to our kids.
Yeah.
We do that to our kids all the time.
Right.
Suddenly we say, time to go, time to do this. And it can create this emotion that may create a situation where there's a power struggle. But
that's really
my
good.
point here is give advance warning. And a lot of parents are doing this. In order to do transitions well, what helps a lot is, hey, Kurt, I know you're watching this show, but in 30 minutes, it's your bedtime. And now it's 15 minutes.
Yep.
Now it's 5 minutes.
Now it's 1 minute. My daughter sets a timer.
Yeah.
When for transitions.
Yes.
Hey, I'm going to set the timer for 2 minutes, and then it's going to be time to take our nap. And they're totally fine with that. And without it, it feels too sudden. They didn't see it coming. It's interesting.
It's like a simple tool. I do know a lot to implement it, but if there are any parents that don't, it's a really great skill tip to have.
That's really cool. Well, one of my final tips, maybe my last tip, is I've got two, but I'm going to do them both real fast. One is, because this one's a little bit redundant, but one is just ask yourself the question, does this require discipline? Or maybe is it just a teachable moment? Do we need a discipline, or we just need to have a heart-to-heart talk? Right? Not everything requires discipline. Again, consistency is this behavior was inappropriate.
Right.
That's the consistency. You might choose to talk about it once, and you might choose to discipline once. That's not inconsistent. I mean, that's inconsistent, but the consistency is we don't act this way. I'm going to talk to you about that. Okay, we don't act this way. Now I'm going to. So just kind of ask yourself, do I have? Because nobody likes a discipline. It's no fun.
Yeah.
It's hard work.
Yeah.
Well, maybe, and especially us older generation. I'm not sure if the younger generation struggles as much. Maybe we're guilty of over disciplining. Not everything requires discipline.
Right.
Maybe something can just be a reminder, a conversation. Let's dust our feet off and clean slate this one, right? Like you don't have to dole out discipline every single time. And then my last tip would just be remember that the thing isn't always the thing. So Stephen Carter wrote a book, The Thing Beneath the Thing. It's an old concept. That's just a new way of saying it is, sometimes you have to discipline the behavior in the moment or after the fact because it was inappropriate. But just as parents, remember there's oftentimes, not always, but there's oftentimes something deeper below that behavior. Right. And so address the behavior, address the behavior, but pay attention to and go after and maybe try to uncover what's happening beneath the surface, the thing beneath the thing that's actually causing that behavior. Because that's healthy, and oftentimes we see it all the time in adults. Habits and coping mechanisms and all that. We develop those in unhealthy ways because there's unresolved issues in our life. And so we, as parents, we want to help. Sometimes that's where we get professional help, right? The thing beneath all this stuff, those are just symptoms of maybe something deeper going on. And don't be afraid to tackle and go after the deeper stuff when we need to.
That's good. Yeah. And then that ties in with, if listeners haven't heard our second episode about some of the pitfalls is not being attuned with what's actually going on.
Right.
You could waste a lot of time beating your head against the wall, trying to knock out some behavior when maybe there's just something else going on that if you've addressed that, it can just resolve the issue itself. That's good. Really good. My last tool or tip or technique is that I've heard about recently that I found really helpful is implementing redos. And this might be more appropriate or applicable for parents with younger kids, but this is a technique where if your kids are acting in ways or using words that you are feeling is inappropriate, you just ask them to do a redo and you actually make them do that redo and then really lavishly praise the redo. Okay, so it sounds really like straightforward, but it's actually super effective. So an example of this would be, and this is going to be like a simple example, but the more you think about it, you could see how it applies, is your kid comes to you screaming like, I want ice, like there's an ice cream truck. I want ice cream. Give me money now.
Right.
Okay. And so maybe one of your family values is you don't, when you ask for things, you ask for it respectfully. Let's say that's like a value. So instead of like being triggered by his urgency and responding to his urgency with some sort of urgency in reaction, you can say calmly, like, oh, if you want something, you have to ask for it with respect. And if you do ask for it with respect, you may get it, you may not. But if you don't ask for it with respect, you certainly won't get it.
So why don't we try it again?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Exactly. So let's try it again. This time you want to try it with respect. And then, the kid might be like, Mommy, could I have ice cream, money to buy ice cream from the truck, please?
Right.
And then sometimes this point, parents might be like, continue to belabor the bad behavior. Like, so that's better because you always ask for things now. And then, but instead in this redo, if they do it, even if they're like kind of grumpy about it, great job. That's a wonderful way to ask for it. And then now as a parent, you could say yes or no. I mean, you have that choice to say, thank you for asking for it with respect. That's wonderful. And you could be even more fun and like goofy about it when they're younger.
Yeah.
Like, let's try that again. Or like gentle, whatever behavior that you want them to redo. As soon as they redo it, you like lavish praise. That's wonderful. That's how we want to hear it. And then you move forward. And what this technique does is it builds in positive memory of positive behavior. And you actually practice that with kids. So instead of always just lecturing them, you shouldn't do it this way, by like always kind of building in redo, almost like as a routine part of how you interact, they start to like actually practice. And behavior, you get better at it with practice. So you're just actually making them practice good behavior in small ways and then affirming it. Like, wonderful. We love it when people ask for things respectfully. It just is, it just makes everyone feel like value. Thank you so much. And then you move on, you know?
I mean, the art of the redo is just so simple and genius.
So simple.
And genius. Well, everybody, Grace, thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody, thanks so much for joining us. That's 3 episodes on discipline. I never thought we'd spend 3 full episodes, and it feels like we could have just
and they
kept
were
going.
great.
So, man, we hope, parents, you'll share this one with your friends. As always, if you're watching on YouTube, right up here is a bunch of our episodes. Click the one that's attractive to you. And then if you'd like to subscribe, you can do that by clicking the subscribe button right around here. Man, we sure enjoy doing these podcasts. We hope you're enjoying them. We hope they're helping you, and we hope you'll share them with your friends. We'll see you next time around.
Thanks, everyone.